With Insomniac's Spider-Man 2 being the latest greatest Spider-Man adventure, I want to take the time to talk about one of my favorite horror games of all time. Now you might be asking yourself, why did I mention horror games and Spider-Man in the same sentence? That is a valid question indeed, but save that for later. If you know, you know, but for those who don't, let me take you back to a childhood favorite game of mine and countless others who grew up in the 2000s. So grab your web blasters, your favorite Spider-Man movie walkie-talkies, and get comfortable as I look back fondly on an unforgettable Spider-Man adventure that also scared me shitless. The early 2000s was an incredible time period for any fan of old webhead. The Sam Raimi trilogy was about to kick off, ushering in a new wave of fans and bringing the appeal of comic book characters to a wider audience. Spider-Man was prominently featured in the many crossovers Marvel had with Capcom from the 90s onward with Marvel Superheroes vs. Street Fighter, and of course, Marvel vs. Capcom 1 and 2. In 2000, we would see the release of quite possibly the best Spider-Man game to date, simply titled Spider-Man. Spider-Man released for various home consoles, including the N64 with some features missing, and a superior Dreamcast version. There was also a Game Boy Color version, but for this video, we're going to be sticking to the PS1 version that I played growing up. The PS1 and N64 versions are almost the same, but the N64 cartridges could only do so much. Instead of cutscenes between levels in the PS1 version, the N64 version opts instead for comic book panels with still images and dialogue with accompanying music. It isn't as cool as having the fully voiced cutscenes, but at least the N64 version serves a palatable alternative. The game is stylized much like the animated series, sharing the font of the Spider-Man logo, and even some of the actors from the animated series and Spider-Man Unlimited. Without even touching the game yet, I have to mention the kick-ass remix of the original 60s cartoon from the start screen. What a solid choice. Right from the start screen, I was in for a real treat. It's no wonder the music was so good because it was composed by Tommy Tallarico, who worked on music for Earthworm Jim, among countless other titles. The 60s Spider-Man intro used for the start screen was remixed by an English group called Apollo 440. The soundtrack is immaculate the whole way through and oozes that early 2000s charm. Each level has some sort of industrial or nu metal inspired track that perfectly encapsulates the late 90s and that early 2000s sound. This is a Neversoft project we're talking about. You know, the guys that helped shape many a disgruntled youth's music taste, from punk rock to ska and the industrial sound of Spider-Man. Love him or hate him, Tommy Tallarico knows how to make a gaming soundtrack. Our story begins at a science expo with Doc Ock holding a keynote about his vision for the future of mankind that is cut short by an imposter Spider-Man, who we actually know later on is Mysterio. The imposter destroys Eddie Brock's camera, frames Spidey in the process, and we see that Doc Ock and Carnage are in cahoots. Doc Ock then spills chemicals into the streets of New York City, clouding everything in its path. The fog blanketing the streets was a result of the limitation of the hardware, but it also inspired the story's direction. Since the PS1 could only render so much at a time, using the limitations of the console to create an original Spider-Man story was genius. The first mission begins immediately following the cutscene, and what is neat is the loading screens are comic book style covers, showcasing a well-drawn snapshot of each level. I always thought these were incredibly cool to look at even today. There was a nice level of detail to them that made them look like actual comic book covers. As the camera pans around the now polluted New York City shrouded in fog, Stan Lee delivers a spectacular narration of the events that are about to unfold in Spider-Man's first proper 3D outing.
Welcome, true believers and newcomers alike. Spider-Man co-creator Stan Lee here.
His voice never fails to evoke such an air of heroism, adding extra oomph to his descriptions.
Packed to the brim with thrills and chills, twists and turns.
Now filled with determination, I was ready to deliver a good old-fashioned beatdown. No, better yet,
web-slinging, ass-kicking.
Speaking of which, for Spider-Man's first foray into 3D, the combat was surprisingly fun. The combos are simplistic by today's standards, no doubt, but every punch and kick has weight behind it. Spider-Man would actually lay the groundwork for future Spidey titles. The next two major ones being Spider-Man 2 Enter Electro, which was weirdly only for PS1, and the 2002 movie game would build upon the foundation that was put forth by Spider-Man with similar web swinging and combat mechanics. The gameplay never felt boring in Spider-Man. There are a plethora of unlockables and collectibles to be found in different nooks and crannies. You can find comic book covers that span the wall crawler storied history, like Secret Wars number 8, Amazing Fantasy number 15, and Spider-Man 2099. Additionally, you can unlock various suits like the symbiote suit, Captain Universe, and the bombastic Bagman. Some suits even come with additional perks such as unlimited webbing, double power for attacks, and invincibility. If you don't feel like going through the hassle of unlocking everything the hard way, you don't have to. To this day, I can never forget one of the most memorable cheat codes in gaming history. When you input Stan Lee's name backwards as Eelnats, you unlock everything from the jump: storyboards, comic covers, and a lot more. For its time, this game was packed with plenty of content and replayability. The Easter eggs were also plentiful and fun to point out. Seeing as this game was developed by Neversoft, there were various ads for Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2, which would launch only 2 weeks after Spider-Man. It was a nice trip down memory lane seeing that again after all these years. Spider-Man is an absolute blast, and I'm sure most of you know if you grew up with the game, but that also means you remember the horrifying side of Spider-Man. Let me paint a picture for you in case you don't remember. After your first encounter with Venom, you chase him into the sewers, and the unspeakable horror that awaits is enough to send a chill down the spine of any unsuspecting kid at the time. The Lizard's grisly leftover experiments reside in the murky sewers of New York City, and they are pissed. The first time you go down this hallway, lizard men attack you and make some of the most horrific noises I've ever heard from any enemy in gaming. The screeches they make as they attempt to kill Spider-Man was unnerving to say the least. It also doesn't help that you're in this murky, dingy sewer where sometimes there's no music and it's just you and them with those noises. I remember having to walk away from the game at times because it was some spooky shit. The thing is though, it gets worse as you progress through the game. The symbiotes that are occupying the Daily Bugle had these unnatural movements and also made their own blood-curdling noises. Eventually, Spidey was able to equip himself with flammable webbing to use against the symbiotes. And as you shot them with the webbing, they writhe and scream in gruesome agony as they wither away to nothingness. Oh, and it doesn't stop there either. Oh no. Carnage was pretty creepy, right? I mean, he's a serial killer. As he's attempting to murder you with his axe hands, he's laughing maniacally as he does it. But that was manageable as a youngster. Then it happens. It was a hard road for Peter throughout the entirety of the story. Cops want him dead, his wife almost drowned to death at the hands of Venom, Punisher almost snipes him, and that's not even all of it. There I was, little Mikey playing Spider-Man. I led Peter out of the lizard-infested sewers, defeated the symbiotes, and took down Doc Ock and Carnage. Then a tentacle grabs Spidey by the throat and throws him to the floor, and Monster Rock appears. I was allowed to play practically any game I wanted growing up. Didn't matter. Thanks, folks. I even played games like Nightmare Creatures and Eternal Darkness, but nothing could prepare me for Monster Rock. He lets out a blood-curdling scream as he chases you through a building ready to blow up at any minute. All the while chasing you, he screams, "Die!" That was next level horror, man. I remember shutting the game off before I could even complete it. I would eventually get around to it after a little while, but just wow. That was actually traumatizing, along with most other media of the day. I mean, remember Return to Slab, anyone? Monster Rock is the sole reason I classify this game as a survival horror. When I replayed it for this review, the chase still gives me that same level of anxiety. I can at least get a good laugh at Monster Rock's PS1 model. It's kind of a shame this character only appears in this game. I'd absolutely love to see this character return in some capacity, but that's probably a licensing nightmare. According to the director of Spider-Man, Chad Findley, hope I'm saying your name right, the licensing issues are why we haven't even gotten a remaster, which was talked about in 2019. Replaying Spider-Man today was still a blast, even in a post-Arkham Asylum world of superhero games. Of course, Insomniac Spider-Man titles are undoubtedly the best video game entries the wall crawler has ever had, but it was still nice to see how far his games have come even since the release of this game. With great sound design, music, and simplistic but fun gameplay, it's no wonder the game scored as well as it had back in the day. Sure, the horror elements were enough to traumatize any kid who played it, but it was worth it. Maybe a little therapy will go a long way for that, who knows. I'm actually wondering if any kids did go to therapy because of Monster Rock. I would not be shocked. And also, Venom alone was worth the playthrough. It is easily one of my favorite portrayals of him, with the snappy remarks, one-liners, and other jokes. Legends say he's still waiting for Captain America's autograph autograph to this very day.